Ты должен полностью войти в роль, иначе тебе никто не поверит.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Czar. Hello, Yuda
Привет.
and Ivan.
Здравствуйте.
It's great to have us all together on our 11th episode. This is right, the 11th, right, Yuda?
Yeah, it's the 11th episode right after the Akroshka. We had a little bit of a summer break here, so
We
we're getting
needed.
it back. The train's getting back into the station here, so
Well,
yeah.
your Kroshka inspired me to make one at home, so that was a good one.
How did it go? How did you like it?
It was good. It was good. My first ever, so
Oh,
everybody
that's awesome.
enjoyed it.
No, I didn't know that. Bravo. So you made it with kefir, probably, right?
Yep.
Okay, I like
It's
that.
good.
Awesome. So, just to introduce our guest, Ivan Podvalov has been somebody that I've been reading a lot on Facebook because he posts so many very interesting things about Russian heritage, and has a really big passionate interest in the subject. Anybody who's on the White Diaspora forum on Facebook has read his articles. He just writes articles one after another, very much reminding me of my grandfather, who is also a historian. And as a matter of fact, the two of you had even corresponded. So it's really an honor to have you on here. And we're looking forward to discussing Russian Hollywood. We're going to get into this. Is a huge subject, so there's no way we're going to encapsulate all of this in the course of our podcast, right, Kato?
Exactly. You're talking about literally 100 years ago when Russians were appearing ready in Hollywood. And this is pre-revolution and actually silent movies. What are you talking? Talkies, not talkie. How'd you call that? You would
Talkies. Well, you could say talkies or sound films, whatever you prefer. You have the silent era and then the sound era or the talkie era. And that started in the late 20s already. But just to give a little bit of perspective here too. So it's, film was started getting its feet in the early 20th century, essentially, and you already had productions happening, including in Tsarist Russia. Tsarist Russia also had its actors, and of course Russians were always very well known in theater too. And you had the Moscow Art Theater with Konstantin Stanislavski. Then you had Meyerhold as well. A lot of interesting things going on in Russia. And then, of course, the revolution happened, which, was a cataclysmic event. But, then Soviet cinema was born. Meanwhile, you had people that left Russia and ended up in the United States, which was the mecca of cinema, especially pre-World War II. It was really, the place to be. And contributed tremendously to that. So let's start. Maybe we could talk about Mikhail Chekhov.
Just interrupt you though. Not everybody jumped from Russia to America, mind you. Some made it to Germany.
Oh, sure.
And this was before World War II, where they were developing. I mean, Chekhov, Mischa Chekhov, ended up in Berlin, and from Berlin to England, and so on. Right. So
the nephew of the Anton Pavlovich Chekhov, the writer. So anyway, so Ivan, let's talk a little bit about Chekhov, and maybe you could share what you know about him.
Well, Michael Chekhov is a very known figure in Hollywood. I wasn't really aware of the fact that there was a documentary made and dedicated to him, basically by a group of, megastars of the Hollywood industry, which I went through recently and thoroughly enjoyed seeing and hearing their expressions about how wonderful as a teacher, first of all, he himself was, and then one of his partners, Mr. Shdanoff, were. So besides that, I happen to be, I think I'm jumping ahead, I happen to be a parish member of a parish he used to belong to, Holy Transfiguration Parish here in Hollywood. And at that time...
Well, excuse me, but that's the small church, right? The small church, one-level church. Is that the one we're talking about?
No, that is a historical church. That's the first Russian church, which was actually established in 1923 here in Hollywood, and it's in Silver Lake. But for whatever reason, he chose the different church. That church was established in 1930, and it's located on Fountain Street, which is in Russian community here used to be known as Fontanka.
Oh.
Really? Huh? Pretty cool.
Yeah, Fontanka, as in St. Petersburg, Fontanka, where actually Michael Chekhov was born. So there we go.
Yeah.
Hey, so let's talk about. So Michail Chekhov basically is an actor who ends up becoming a teacher, a great teacher of many actors. A lot of very famous actors he taught. So anyway, so let's maybe talk about his early life a little bit.
He didn't right away start acting, or should I correct this again? Go back a little bit. His first time noted to be impersonating his father at 6 years old, because his mom he was the only child, right? From that era, from growing up, and he was there trying to impersonate his father in front of his mother, and she saw that he's got something there in common. Mind you, I also was thinking at one time to be an actor, and I performed at church plays and so on, and I have performed while I was living overseas in Moscow. I also performed, but I did not go through no Chekhov, no Stanislavski school.
You missed a great chance, Kotor.
I know.
If you were just born a couple of decades earlier, you would have been just fine.
But right now, I questioned you. I wasn't too sure, Ivan. I wasn't too sure that Yuda knew who Stanislavski was. And on kakabidus на меня и got. What do you mean?
I did graduate from NYU Film School. Come on, give me some credit here.
So anyway, again, he started in MCAT, performing at MCAT. Actually, went to another school before that, Suvorin.
We're talking about Chekhov right now?
Yeah.
All right.
But again, I don't know too much about his youth, right? I know more about what has happened with him here in the States, right? So,
of course, yeah. All right. Well, just to basically, if we're going to summarize it, Chekhov is interesting in that he grew up in, he cut his teeth as an actor in the Moscow Art Theater with Stanislavski, and he started developing a slightly divergent theory from Stanislavski's theory. Now, just to explain for people who are not into, don't know the craft of acting, Stanislavski developed what is famously known as method acting. So in other words, the whole idea here is you rely heavily on your emotions and your memory of other people's emotions in order to project a character. So you kind of become, you basically, let's say if you have to cry, you remember a time in your life when you were crying. Same thing with laughter and other things like that. Chekhov kind of said, let's take this a little one step removed. Let's not make it so traumatic for the actor to have to remember their father's funeral or something like that. Let's try to use their imagination more. And so he kind of removed it by one layer, and that, he was still loyal to Stanislavski's method in many ways, but he decided to kind of do,
well, there's a reason behind it.
Do a riff on Stanislavski, basically, which I think a lot of actors found a lot more palatable.
There's a reason behind that, because as I read about it, it was from his spiritual interest and spiritualism.
Well, spiritually, you got to be careful here. I don't think it was from necessarily an Orthodox Christian standpoint.
No. This is from his early life when he was trying to understand, and he was part of the earth, and so his methods were to grow. Okay, that he's part of the earth, getting this system in, and it's growing into you. From that perspective, he was Orthodox. He had a funeral. And as Ivan explained, he was a member of the church. So, but I'm saying from a youth point of view that he had the spiritual understanding a little bit different, and so on. So, Mom was Jewish.
So anyway, so Ivan, let's talk. Some actors and people that he's influenced. I think
the most impressive factor was that, to me, from that movie, it was that Marilyn Monroe, after passing, she requested in her will that funds will be sent out to his widow for the duration of her life, and she allocated
Wow.
the about I think $2,500 yearly, and that was kind of touching to me. I thought that if stars like Marilyn Monroe, who studied with Chekhov, even didn't let go of his widow, speaks big meaning, so speaks big words to me.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard of a story like that ever before. Like somebody caring so much about someone that they would just go and, support their widow, like practically for the rest of her life. I mean, sadly, Marilyn Monroe didn't live very long.
Recently here in Hollywood, there were auctioning letters from a state of Marilyn Monroe, and there were a few letters sent by Ksenia Chekhov, the Michael Chekhov widow, saying that, thank you notes to her, saying that, I will use those $15 for, remodeling the house I'm living in. I will put in a new wallpapers in, and so on and so on. So Marilyn Monroe and her and Ksenia kept in touch, or actually tight touch.
So do you guys understand where I also have heard about that, actually try to better understand Marilyn Monroe and how she got into Michael Chekhov? She approached Jack Palance, also еще один of Ukrainian descent, where Jack Palance suggested you should try Michael Chekhov. And when Jack Palance called up Michael Chekhov, could you take in a student for me? And Mischa, he used to call him by Mischa, he said, I can't take in anybody. I've got so many people, I don't have any more space. I don't. So Jack umalial, right, was true. Please take in this person because she's beautiful, and she's got an opportunity. So Jack Palance managed to convince Chekhov to take her in, and what Mischa said, he said, I'll work with her only once a week, and that may be an hour or two in the beginning, and that's all I'm going to be able. And eventually, he took her in for the entire week. He would take her 5 days a week to just train her one-on-one. So what we see, what the early Marilyn Monroe to what it came out to be, that's Chekhov's teaching. That's a very good, probably the best example as the first you see Marilyn Monroe in her first movies to later movies completely change over. So
yeah, that's exactly what the film critics were talking in that documentary. Yep, absolutely.
And the connection to Chekhov, Mischa Chekhov and his wife Ksenia, was the fact that she said that she also gave a present to Michael Chekhov when he was still alive, the President Abraham Lincoln portrait. Says with an autographed, she autographed it to him. Says this was the follow I used to follow, and that's no more. Now I'm following you, Marilyn Monroe, and she was so connected to Mischa Chekhov that that's when he died. She also подарила икону. She actually donated, gave a present to Chekhov, an icon. I wish I could see this icon. I haven't seen it, but this is what I've managed to learn. And ever since then, in the will, when she wanted to make sure Ksenia gets some portion, which was very nice.
I think I will touch base on how Michael tried to get to United States and who helped him with relocating from Europe. Obviously, while in Europe, Sergei Rachmaninov and him were good friends. And Sergei Rachmaninov put in a few words in Hollywood to Gregory Ratov and some
Sure.
other people who were working in Hollywood saying that, hey, there's a friend of mine who is in need of, relocating and finding the means and jobs, and I think Hollywood will be a good fit for him. And so, with the help of Sergei Rachmaninoff, Michael Chekhov made his way to Hollywood.
Wow, that's true.
And then few letters, I think, read some few letters. He was, he didn't get a chance to thank you, Rachmaninoff, here in Hollywood in person, sadly, because Rachmaninoff passed away in 1941, right? So, but he
Well,
laid the foundation for him.
if and also add to that, right? Mind you, he wasn't really focused on film actors. He was mostly focused on play actors. That
Theater.
was original theater, right? So, but still, those are actors, and his techniques to this day are still. I mean, when I was trying to research about Michael Chekhov, to find one organization, right? There's like 6 organizations just in America, and there's another 1 or 2 in Europe and 1 or 2 in other places. So he's got really a chain of schools. Everyone's trying to, no one's related, but again, that's how big his techniques were.
Well, here's a good idea to mention also Georgii Shdanov, who was also together with him. Georgii Shdanov was about maybe 10 years younger than Chekhov. But
Yeah.
Shdanoff also was trained originally in Russia and then also made it abroad. And then when the two of them met, Shdanoff, that already I believe they may have met in the States. I'm not exactly sure about that. But Shdanoff actually is the one who kind of helped formulate Chekhov's work and make it
Yes.
more accessible for English-speaking actors and
Yes.
actresses. And then since Chekhov died, before Shdanoff continued all the way into all the way until he died, I think somewhere in the 80s. Continued furthering that school of thought, and it's really impressive what he was able to do in that almost 30-year stretch after Chekhov had passed away.
Agreed.
Well, yeah, there were a few. First of all, when Chekhov came in to Hollywood, he opened a laboratory, so to say, a theater laboratory, right? It's a group of, basically a theater school, and
Right.
it's operated in Hollywood, basically on Hollywood Boulevard for a long period of time. And he put in amazing plays, which he engaged all the actors and movie actors, not only movie actors, but the theater actors as well. So yeah, so he left an impressive mark on few peoples who carry on besides Zhdanov. Some of his students went in and undertake the challenge to open a Chekhov schools, theater schools in New York, for example. So one of his students, a former student in dancing, actually, she was a dancer, but she considered to take his theater teaching and implement that in her dancing routines,
Wow.
and that helped you to unfold and perform as a dancer better. So she went into New York and opened a school, Chekhov School in New York. That school lasted, I think, until middle 2000s.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how because I think what he did was he really made method acting more digestible for actors, because acting is, of course, a very it's there's an old joke about Dustin Hoffman, who was a real Stanislavskian method actor, and Laurence Olivier, who was much more into this more mechanical method of acting. And there's a story about how Dustin Hoffman starved himself for 3 days because he was going to be in a scene in The Marathon Man where he was he was deprived, and so he went through all the physical motions so he would know everything. And then Laurence Olivier looked at him and says, "You poor boy, why don't you try acting?" And I think that Chekhov kind of bridges between that purely mechanical method of acting and the Stanislavskian method, where you're just pouring your emotions out in a very potentially traumatic way for some actors. And I think that speaks to the popularity of his method. I mean, take a look at Clint Eastwood, another one of his students. Cool Clint, right? I mean, he just always projects cool. Of course, Anthony Quinn. We've got Ingrid Bergman, Gregory Peck, and good old Yul Brynner. Maybe we can spend a little time on Yul. given his Russian heritage. Talk a little bit about Yul Brynner.
I think there'll come a time when we talking about him, right? But
Well, let's
yes,
say at least who he was, because not everybody knows who Yul Brynner is. Maybe
well,
we do, but
well, actually, are you sure you know about Yul Brynner? Because not too many people know how he started. Really, I mean, he started.
I don't need to do a whole discussion on Yul Brynner right now, but it's just I love it when you see people in these situations where there's like Michael Chekhov
Was
meets
so connected. Absolutely, it's so
somebody like
connected.
Yul Brynner, our good old Russian actor. Anyway,
Yul Brynner won an Oscar, right? So his teacher, which was Michael Chekhov, I think was nominated to an Oscar as well, right?
for one
One.
Hitchcock film,
Yeah.
Hitchcock film, he played a role. That's the only like really visible film that Chekhov himself played in. from
But
what I
he
was-
did not want to. He didn't want to really do. He actually had no interest, as much as I know, to really appear in films. Right? He was mostly interested in play theater. Okay, that's as much as I understand. So he was not really pushing for it. And when they needed it, he would come in. And the one reason why he stopped actually really performing in movies is during the when the Cold War began, and the movie, The Song of Russia, when people were being blacklisted, and that's why he stepped down. He says, "That's it. I'm not going to be performing anymore in movies." Though he died in 1955, right? So 56.
Oh yeah. By the way, I think it's about the 60th anniversary since his death. So
Yes.
very timely podcast for you.
There you
yes,
go.
absolutely, very timely indeed. So this is interesting. I mean, we have we have a lot of. That's the thing. There's Russian Hollywood. There's so many people we could keep going on and on about. I mean, I remember when we
Will.
chatted with Ivan about it. There was just like maybe like a dozen names that just came out just over the course of a 3-minute conversation. It's like,
There's actually quite a few.
With Hollywood, there's few people who probably remember Yul Brynner here. He was very close with the Yankovsky family. They immigrated from Vladivostok through China, I think. And Yankovsky still lives in Russian River area. So he wrote a big book about the Yankovskys. And I think he mentions a lot about the Brynner's family while they were navigating first to Vladivostok, then China, the estates they had there, and so on and so on. So
I never got to meet Yul Brynner, but I did meet his brother. I'm sorry, his son. His son, Rock Brynner. I met him a couple of times. The few times he would travel to Russia, he would go through Moscow. And he stopped at the Dom Ruski Zarubezhye, where he was wanted, and Victor Moskvin would ask him to do a lecture here and there. So that's where I would end up meeting up with him more than a couple of times. Wonderful.
well, he had an amazing sister also who used to perform at every event, right? So including Veteran Society, Invalids Balls, and so on and so on. So the family was outstanding. Yeah, very artistic.
Yeah.
well, this is
Romani
what's
music.
interesting too, is you have certain people who come in, you have people of Russian descent who are involved in Hollywood. Obviously, Hollywood is an all-consuming lifestyle. You've got a lot of social obligations. It's very, your schedule is booked. You're always trying to get work or whatever. You have to do PR for your films, everything. It's a very exhausting thing, which is why there's hardly a single person in Hollywood that stayed married to the same person for for any length of time. But what I find is interesting is when these people who are of Russian descent still maintain some connection to their Russian heritage. They go to church, or they're philanthropists, or they have some kind of a footprint in the staple in the Russian community, despite their very busy schedule, because by far not everybody does that. I don't know if there's anybody that talks to you. I mean, that speaks to you when you think of those kind of people, Ivan.
Early Hollywood, basically everybody who moved into Hollywood, including Michael Vavich, and Olga Baclanova, Akim Tamirov, and numerous of other actors. They were basically founders of First Russian Orthodox Cathedral. That's how religion and Vera, it was important for them. And not only founded, but they supported it. They fundraised, they participated in every event and a ball set up here in Hollywood. They rally all the Hollywood stars to attend.
Ivan, do you know
Mary Pickford, Drew Barrymore, Zyd Grumman, everybody was in attendance in every Russian ball which was put in here in the early 20s. And everybody donated money for the church.
do you know
Mischa Auer, which is...
That's what I want to ask you about Mischa. I want to ask you, Mischa Auer, you know him, right?
Yeah, Mischa Auer was another very important figure in the Russian community here in Los Angeles. He undertook a challenge of basically paying electrical bills for the duration of his life for the church. Recently, I looked into the records of the church, and all of his children were baptized in the church. He adopted few, and they were brought into...
I've got a mysterious question regarding Mischa Auer.
Uh-huh.
Why was he buried out in the middle of in the state of New York? He's got a lonely grave in this. Either he owned land, or I guess maybe one of the adopted children. He's interred in the state of New York in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I'm not trying to.
It's interesting sometimes how the Hollywood career winds down, and there's a lot of actors, believe it or not, ending up in trailer parks.
Well, Shdanoff, I think, lived in an apartment or complex, right, at the end of his life as well.
Right. So you look at the history of those people. Sometimes will carry on, but a lot of them, like recently, I was reading about Sten, another Russian actress, which is well known in Hollywood in 1940s, and same way, you look at the map when she came into Hollywood. She lived in a most upscale, very expensive area in Brentwood. Then she moved out from that area to Beverly Hills, to a little more modest house. And then in the early 70s, she was living in someone's guest house, all alone and forgotten. So,
it is interesting. Yeah, again, their career stopped at some point and they had to move on. I understand, right? And Hollywood's always looking for something fresh, someone new. So
right.
I guess it's a standard process. But anyway, Mischa Auer, when I was discovering him, I was actually quite interested about him. And he was Jewish. He converted to Orthodoxy, I believe, in Los Angeles, because he fell in love with the Russian community, the Община. And that's how it. But why was he interred in the middle of New York? I was just a little bit lost with that. And I'll guess one way or another I'll find out. But anyway, that church is going to be actually interesting to talk about, because the community that it was built upon, and the Metrichesky Kniги probably going to be very interesting to look. I don't know if you have had the opportunity, but that Metrichesky Kniги probably was wonderful information.
Yeah, I've looked through it. The baptizing of Olga Baclanova's son and Nikolai's son and son took place in 1930 in that church.
1930s.
And Metropolitan Platon came in, and he was conducting the services for a newborn. So Olga Baclanova, she did not stay in Hollywood for too long.
Right.
But if you looked at her, so she is the same type. So she did a few movies, silent movies in Hollywood, and then talkies kicked in. She did few talkies, and then she moved on to playing in the theater, which prolonged her acting life for a way longer.
Yeah. Terrible down the line, her son or her grandson ended up dying in New York City, a mugging attempt, and they actually killed him.
Yeah. That was her son. He witnessed the robbery.
There you
and
go.
That was in Maryland by Washington, right? So he witnessed the robbery, and so he served in the U.S. Army, and he served in the U.S. Navy, and he witnessed the two guys robbing the auto parts stores and went after them, and so he was shot by
Lost.
one of the robbers.
Robbers,
So yeah, robbers. And actually, one of the people commented on my post the other day that, like heritage. That's what interesting. That Olga Baclanova's grandchildren, all four of them, Nicholas, Christopher, and a few other ones, they participated in the Russian Scouts on the East Coast for
Yeah.
long time. So and now there's the third generation.
Well, he went to, as I understand, Ivan Alyoshin brought this up. So he went to the camp in Tolstoy Farm, and his son actually went to Nor 1 year. So it's this is wonderful. It goes on really far and deep. So anyway, getting back to still about the church, is definitely going to be an interesting episode. Are they, Ivan, beside yourself, unless you think that you are strong with this, and I think you are, there might be somewhat of interest to talk to in the future about an episode about the church and how it built up, the Russian Hollywood built it up along something.
Yeah, I actually, there was a centennial we just celebrated, and there's a documentary which I will probably send you a link to look at. So we did put that together, and it reviews the history in 30 minutes. You can have a good perspective of what was happening.
Great. Okay.
That's great. And by the way, we're also going to have a link to the documentary about Michael Chekhov too, which is definitely interesting. You could see, I think what's great about that documentary is just to see how many famous people are just so grateful for what he was able to do for their careers, which is really a testament, because you really don't hear that much about acting coaches. And it's such an important part of the whole process of film, of making a film great, because that's what builds, Hollywood is all built on stars, right? It's all built on these recognizable people. And I think that's one thing that Chekhov also, talked a lot about in his work, was building a presence, right? I think he actually told Jack Palance this whole thing about, he said, if you ever show up for an audition, usually what's happening is the casting director's just looking at their clipboard. They're not paying much attention to anything, and they're just waiting for you to start or whatever it is. You're reading your sides. And then he said, wait for that person to make eye contact with you, and you introduce yourself and say, hello, I am Jack Palance. And then that kind of builds a presence, you see. So it's things like that, things that what make actors work and what enable them to, perform for you. Someone like Chekhov is absolutely vital to getting that across, especially in the pre-film school era when, with that, you really didn't have that kind of training like you have now in film schools. And even that, honestly, that kind of an intense school of thought for acting and for, for being able to communicate with your audience is really critical. And especially given the fact that Russians have such a rich experience in theater, which goes back, centuries.
Arts. Right.
I would say, it's not just the theater. Hollywood have a lot of ballet studios and musical song studios, vocal studios, and it just carried on and carried on and carried on. And all those actors, they probably cycled through a few other studios, not just Chekhov studios, to get better in acting skills.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's arts, because really it's ballet, it's opera, it's acting, it's singing, and so on, besides literally artistry, right? So
famous composers, Konstantin Bakaleinikov, right, who worked in
sure, and his brothers,
right? So they conducted main orchestras across United States, and they worked in Hollywood
and on film, exactly. In animation, how many people in animation?
Right. Their sister Nadezhda Borina had a studio which was quite famous amongst popular amongst Hollywood actors as well. So she was teaching voice, and she was teaching singing, and she was teaching presentation, and so on and so on. So, yeah, he was there.
It literally grows.
Well, look, I think we had a very good introductory survey with some very good specific stories about the Russian presence in Hollywood and cinema. Because, of course, we could talk about Soviet cinema, which is a huge subject, and I'm a very big fan of that. But this is specifically Russians that have actually made it in Hollywood and have made an influence in Hollywood and have left their footprint in Hollywood, and movies that we all love, that won Oscars, that have gotten recognition. and they were a major creative force in that whole process. And I think that's what we've just chipped the tip of that iceberg right now with our podcast. But we're gonna keep going into it.
I was actually looking at the statistics of Oscars, right? So, and that's the first, so to say, Russian who won an Oscar was Louis Milestone, right? So he was born in Moldavia, right? So nowadays it's Moldavia.
Russian
and that was Russian Empire. So 1927. So interesting fact about him that he was a member of a Russian American art club here in Hollywood. I think at the time he was a president, and the art club, which was run by him and a few other Russians, actually gathered a massive group of Russians. And it's not only Russians, we're talking about Russian Jews, Russian Molokhans, and everybody. So, yeah. So he got a great example, right? Or the latest one, I think, was it was like in 2000, right? So there was I think an animation movie, which is, I think it was a Soviet animation movie, so which took an award. But in totals, there were about 161 nominations,
Really? Huh?
Russian nominations to Oscars, and about 32 or 33 victories, wins. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a lot to uncover.
Well,
wow, there is. Well,
and besides that, and let me add, I'll here. So it's not just that, right? So all the students that actually went through Chekhov and Shdanov, how many have won awards from them too? So, and to this day, it's endless, right? Because really the schools, there's 3, 4, 5, so let's just say 4 schools in America that these students keep on pumping through. And they're producing actors and actresses under the Chekhov, Shdanov, although it's predominantly called Chekhov, but like you said, we can't forget Shdanov, because he's the one who formulated and continued on and was building on it, because Shdanov is not a famous name as Chekhov. So he just continued on under Chekhov, rightfully so. So yeah, hundreds.
I want to once again thank you, Ivan, for joining us. It was really a pleasure having you on, and I hope that our listeners are all going to go to White Russian Diaspora Network. It's in parenthesis Orthodox by Faith, which Kato started, I don't know how many years ago that was already.
Like 2008, yeah.
Yeah, so join that. It's a private group, but join that. Ivan regularly posts very interesting things there about, Russian history. And, we're going to definitely have Ivan back, and we're going to continue discussing this.
Thank you very much. It was my first podcast, so don't judge too much.
This
is
great.
Beautifully.
You've been great. I really appreciate coming out, and we'll be looking forward to creating the next couple episodes down the line, not right away, about Russians in Hollywood. And you're definitely a connection to that.
Everybody stay tuned, and please like and subscribe.
Дамы и господа, у нас к вам просьба.
Like, subscribe, and share.
Like, subscribe and share.
Спасибо.